Hello and welcome to the space between ideas. I'm Blank Gates. Welcome, welcome. We got some I don't know. So I guess last week I just checked the audio to the video last week. Looked like the audio didn't really work. Um it wanted me to use this little like the audio right here and but actually I wanted it to be the audio on my computer. Tap right here. I'll be able to know if it's using this one or not. Okay, good. All right, so it's using my computer audio. Great. All right, good. So let's get started because I'm going to go over the information that we talked about last week, and then I'm going to go into the information that we talked about this week. So let's start with just in general, what's going on, what's the dealio, and so in the next 2 years, in the next 2 years, it sounds crazy. In the next 2 years, we're going to cover. I know it says 365 days, but actually, if we go through it, then there's actually more weeks than that. We got these epics. We're gonna read a whole bunch of books. Let this out. So we just got like a whole list of books. We got manias, panics, and crashes. We got the intelligent investor. We got the fur trade in Canada. We got trade wars or class wars. We got super imperialism. We got the shock doctrine. I've been reading shock doctrine just for fun, and it's crazy actually. The history of the Canadian business. We got what is this? When money destroys nations. We got treasury wars. We got all these crazy books, and the thing is that all it does is you just take your time and you read this stuff. Why? Because I want to go back to Canada and I want to make a difference. Like I want to do public service, which means public service in my mind. It's a bus driver. It's somebody like there's somebody on the street and they're like, dude, I need to get to work, and then the bus driver says, okay, I can provide that service. So for me, a public servant is somebody who can solve problems, a problem solver. So that's what this is all about. And for 2 years, we're just going to go through this step by step. So you can see that the key source. So in week number one, okay, this is week 1 to 7. Now, so last week was actually, let's scroll down to the bottom. So last week was the first half of chapter one of the Wealth and Poverty of Nations. And like it was a slow start. So we're talking about like 1000 to 1500 sub-Saharan African and tropics. The thing is that like week one was only half of that chapter, and then week two is like the second half of this chapter. That gave us a really good chance to just kind of ease into this new rhythm. All right, now check this out. Cupid Connect. So this series is brought to you by Cubic Connect. So I actually built this website, and the whole purpose of building this website was because like I've been doing research for several years about how to help people to resolve issues, like to how to like plan how to get things done. And so let's just do like what's one thing that this thing can help us to do today. So we're gonna create a project. We got project one, and like let's see. Oh, I gotta record this YouTube video. All right. So let's say that I'm laying on my bed and I'm having a hard time getting out of bed. And so I just like, how do I get out of bed? Help me get out of bed. And I don't feel motivated. Help me. Okay, so you imagine you're laying in your bed and you're just like, man, I just don't feel motivated. I'm not sure what to do. All you do is you just open up my little app on your phone and you just click Qubit, and then you just click this button right here. Now, for some reason, oh, it actually worked really fast today. Okay, so sit up slowly and place your feet firmly on the floor and ground your body. All right, so check this out. Okay, so boom, there we go. Drink a full glass of water sitting on your nightstand, hydrate, and wake up your internal systems. Pick one small, non negotiable physical task like washing your face or make your bed and complete it immediately. Open your curtains or step into a brighter room and signal to your body and brain the active part of your day has begun. Boom, you're out of bed. You see that? It's amazing. So, like Cuba Connect, it helps you. If you're having a hard time getting something done, then all you have to do. Oh, wait a minute. What do you mean drink a full glass of water? I don't understand. So then you click deep dive and then you just click step number two. It'll take that second item and it'll put it down into this area here. Reach out to the nightstand while remaining seated and locate the glass of water with your peripheral vision. Grip the glass firmly. I don't. How do you grip the glass firmly? That's so confusing to me. So then you just click deep dive, and then okay, so position your fingers around the circumference of the glass, spacing them evenly to distribute pressure for a balanced hold. There you go. That's all you have to do. Now, the other thing that you can do is like if this sounds crazy, right? It does sound kind of crazy, but like what you can do is you can like if you don't like it this way, you can go over to the engine. You can go over to the engine tab, and then you can just like paste all of that information in here, and like grab a glass, start the analysis, and then it'll give you the steps. Okay, so we got position fingers, apply pressure, verify stability, a vertical. Okay, so what I mean, I don't know, how do I position my fingers? So just click Cubit and it'll give you the 4 steps. Extend your hand towards the nightstand, identify I don't know what that says. Gently place your thumb and fingers onto this. Okay, how do I do that? You click deep dive, it gives you 4 more steps. Approach the glass slowly with your hand, aligning your thumb and fingers with the 4 identified contact points on the circumference. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you're using the text mode. Now you can download this as a PDF or you can download it as a Markdown file. Doesn't matter if you're using the this mode, engine mode, or to-do list mode. In either case, it's going to help you to get things done. So welcome to Cubic Connect, and let's get back to the show. All right, so today we're just finished off chapter 1 of the Wealth and Poverty of Nations, and we made a couple of presentations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the same presentation as last time because I feel like we didn't quite the audio was bad. So what are you going to do? All right, and then we're going to finish the other half. We're going to finish the second half of the chapter. Now, what's the point? The point, let's start with some background. All right, so look at this. No matter how hard you practice, sometimes fate will have other plans for your wins. What do you see in this Instagram show? Now, in my video from last week, my question is like, am I a racist? Where does this idea come from? It comes from some people think that environmental is racist. Now, do you think this is racist? Okay, so you have a bunch of people that are driving their bikes, and suddenly there's a train, and these people, they want to be safe, and so they decided to not go through this thing because they feel like it's probably dangerous. Now, it gives these guys who got past, it gave them an unfair advantage. So these people who are waiting, like look at this last guy who goes over, and another guy. So he says he thinks that the risk is relatively small. In fact, one, two, three, 4, 5, 6. Like there's literally 6 more seconds that people could have been crossing over, but they didn't because they're like, I don't want to take the risk. All right. So sometimes the risk is just too much. Look at this guy. All right. So this guy, he gets in a bag to protect himself from getting wet. He goes into his car. Then once he gets into his car, boom, he still gets wet. It's crazy, right? Okay, here it is. So this dude, it looks like he's Russian. This is definitely a Russian guy. All right, so he hops over, or he could be from Hungary or from Poland, maybe. And boom. So he thinks he's got the whole world figured out. And then, yeah, good luck. So I'm not talking about racism. I'm just saying that, like, so in last week's video, I explained that, like, some people they think that environmental determinism is racist, but in fact, I think that humans were all the same race. In fact, that was the whole point of last week's video, was to say that we're all humans. We're all human beings. We all came from the same place. The only difference between our DNA is our melanin. And so, and then of course that our cultures, according to this concept of determinism, is that in fact our cultures are shaped by our geography. So the climate, the geography, the landscapes, it shapes human culture, behavior, societal development. Where you live determines how you live. Then there's another group of people, they say, no, possibilism. The environment sets the limits, but humans can overcome them through technology and adaptation. We don't accept the cards we're dealt, we build a new table. And what's the issue now? So I've had a whole week to think about this. And the main issue that a lot of people that I talk to that they're kind of pointing out is they're like, yeah, well, what about when people leave their country and they immigrate to a new country, they immigrate away from their country and immigrate to a new country. And so the people, the parents, they never quite fit into that new culture. But of course, the children, I grew up in Canada, and there was a bunch of kids, their parents came from Jamaica, and then there were some kids came from Hong Kong, and there were kids that came from Pakistan and India. And for me, it was like one dude came from Spain. And like the thing is that like for me, I didn't see the difference because I was a child. And for us, we all grew up together. What do you like? There's no difference. Like you make your life, whatever it takes. And then now when I look at like the classmates I went to school with, I can see that the success of the next generation had very little to do with the success of their parents, the people who immigrated to Canada. But you still have like a lot of cultures who have trouble adapting to new circumstances. You have certain individuals who become educated and then they make different decisions. And then you have other individuals who never get access to the same type of education, the same type of behaviors, and then eventually the same type of possibilities. So let's go through this. Like, why is that the case? I don't know. But like, first, let's talk about geography. So determinism says the runner in the tropics can't finish the race. The heat defeats them before they begin. Possibilism says build an air-conditioned stadium and give them Gatorade, problem solved. All right, so this is the idea that actually with technology, then you can control your environment. And once you control your environment, then of course you have the same advantages as people who have the natural environment the same way. Well, what's the issue? The issue is that the tropical runner spends millions of dollars and thousands of labor hours just to reach the starting line that the temperate runner got for free. Possibilism doesn't erase the cost, it hides it. So what are we talking about? So here it is. So can the sun change our biology? In high UV environments, melanin acts as a natural sunscreen, protecting against DNA damage and folate depletion for intense tropical radiation. Darker skin is an evolutionary adaptation to geography. And in my video from last week, I had a whole bunch of Instagram videos that probably make me look like a racist. And I mean, okay, if you think I'm a racist, fine. I don't know. I lived in China for 10 years. I was married to a Chinese woman. I didn't really think of her as Chinese. I just thought of her as a human. And I've traveled to like over 30 countries. I've lived more years outside of Canada than in. And I've been working as a business coach for the last 10 years. And I talk to everybody. I don't see the difference. But like I'm just saying that this is a fact that the UV rays change the melanin in people's skin, and that's how we get different races. It's because over time the amount of sun exposure we have changes the way we look. Now, at the same time, the geography also affects the ability for us to grow and develop, and our ability to grow and develop also changes our culture and it changes our behavior. All right, so in the north, lighter skin evolved to maximize UV absorption because the body needs sunlight to produce vitamin D. Geography shaped our very bodies. If the sun changes our skin, what else does climate change? All right, so now it's saying that siestas adapt or forced others to adapt. The siesta, rest during peak heat, rest during peak heat, work at dawn and dusk. Slavery forced people to work in conditions no free person would be willing to endure. So the argument is that in fact slavery some people argue that slavery comes from this idea that it's so hot in this part of the world that a lot of people they don't want to work and they would just rather sit around. And then other people, they had like knives and guns or whatever, some technology to force other people to work. And so they're saying that slavery is actually it's when you have a group of people who are stronger than another group of people, or they have access to a certain type of technology, and then they go and they force the other people to work. because regular people don't want to work that much because it's too hot outside. All right, so the central question, if a country starts with extreme heat and no winter frost, are they destined for poverty? Or does it just mean that the entry fee to the global economy is higher? Now, you have to remember that we're not talking about today. So remember that today we have a significant amount of technology. If we think about, for example, let's think about these countries like Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia was one of these countries where the people didn't want to work. It's just too dang hot outside. But then suddenly, when they found that they had access to oil, then okay, now that we have oil, it's like a magical form of energy. They could use that magical form of energy to change the seawater into drinking water, and they can change that magical form of energy into a building and into air conditioning, and then into so because they had oil, it completely changed their economy because they had this magical form of energy. So we're not, but the thing is that this, like in this point in the book, The Wealth and Poverty of Nations, we're not talking about magical technology. We're talking about in the beginning. Acknowledging that nature is unfair isn't racist, it's honest. Now, you might be wondering, like, why do I keep talking about racism? And it's because of the chapter of the book. The book is actually bringing up this concept of geography. Like some people argued that this idea of geography is racist, but this guy is saying no, a person born in fertile temperate zone faces different hurdles than someone born in a malaria prone tropical zone. Geography creates unequal starting lines. That's not judgment, it's an observation. And how does this inform some other aspects of our modern day life? And I've been thinking a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I would say that in general, in the past like couple of years, I've been the kind of guy that's like the conservative, like DEI. This is crazy. Like, why are you talking about DEI? Like, this is so stupid. We're not going to just hire people because of their race. We're not going to be hire people because of their sex. We're not going to hire people because of their, whatever. Because at the end of the day, our culture, it's about the person who's the most qualified. Well, let's hire the most qualified person, and that's who I was. I was this conservative who's like, it's called meritocracy. The person who has the most merit is the person who should be hired. But then, like, as I started to learn more about like this concept of geography, what's it called? Of environmental determinism, then I started to realize that so this is actually a really big problem because we have a lot of different cultures and histories, and we have a lot of different types of people who have different access to education, different access to resources, and it really does matter when it comes to opportunities. And so we need to find a way to enable people who don't have the same. They're like when we look at this guy, right? So some people, they don't have the ability to have the same experiences and the same education and the same opportunities. And we want to be able to raise up our whole nation. Sometimes we hear this thing about like the weakest link is the strength of the country is found in the weakest link. And if you can strengthen your weakest link, then it strengthens the body. Like, you're not gonna die because of, like, 10 things going wrong in your body. You're gonna die because of the one weak thing in your body. And so there is an argument that says, "Hey, let's figure out, like, what is the weakest thing in our culture, in our country, in our community, and let's see how can we help that thing so that we can grow as a whole community." And I'm starting to become, like, more, like, understanding of the differences. All right, so this is the last thing I'm going to say about racism is that no subject is less racist than geography. Geography talks about the temperature of the air, the volume of rainfall, the lay of the land. No one can be praised or blamed from where they were born. All right, so it says only greed can overcome rational repugnance. People pass through deserts, they do not stay. It took the discovery of oil to make humans willing to endure the Arabian desert. What happens when the oil runs out? All right, so and that's the big issue now, like with the so if you're watching the video right now, then you know about the Iran war. If you're watching this video in a few years from now, maybe you won't know as much about the Iran war. Like right now, there is a war, and the United States decided that the government of Iran was spending too much of their time stealing and murdering their citizens. And Israel and the United States decided that, in general, that this type of government where somebody's stealing and killing their citizens is not the best form of government. And sometimes what happens in this type of government is that eventually they develop weapons and then they decide to go and steal and murder people in other countries. And then so the United States and Israel decided that that was good enough reason for them to create a war in order to take over their oil. So it was a little bit like it's kind of murky, right? So I was talking to somebody today about this, about like, because they're like, freedom, like human rights and freedoms. America is about human rights, freedoms, and the institutions that set up the ability for society to develop. And then I was like, yeah, so what you're talking about is a franchise. Like America, they produce something called a Marriott hotel. They produced McDonald's. They produce all these different franchises. And America, what they want is they're saying, look, we have the Constitution of America. We have the institutions to produce like a great society. And so what we want to do is we want to export democracy. Unfortunately, like you never actually hear a McDonald's commercial or a Marriott commercial where like the head of the company is like, "We're going to take your oil." It's like, I don't know, something's going on with their marketing. So it seems a little bit strange these days. All right, so possibilism keeps geography at bay as long as the power stays on. Right, so this is like kind of like one of those desalination factories, and Iran is like really not happy because the U.S. keeps saying that they're going to like bomb their power infrastructure, and then Iran says, "Well, if you bomb our power infrastructure, then we're going to bomb the desalination plants in Saudi Arabia." And then what's going to happen in Saudi Arabia if suddenly they don't have water? It just seems pretty crazy. All right. Now, here's another example where air conditioning rewrote American history. So it says, without it, Atlanta, Houston, New Orleans would still be sleepy, backward towns. Possibilism can work, but technology must be affordable, scalable, and maintained. The South's prosperity is powered by electricity. All right. So it's just bringing up the same point over and over and over and over again, that the climate is one of the biggest influences to human prosperity. And it's only after technology is able to change the climate that we're able to really succeed in these geographical zones. And this is the other example where they were able to get fresh water, and it's through technology and through energy that these see. If they couldn't find oil, gas in the desert, then they would not be investing in these types of factories. And so that must mean that there's also some benefit that comes from Atlanta and Houston and New Orleans. And that's why they invested in developing these technologies. All right. So then the book goes into something like this. So as temperature rises, danger multiplies. Insect swarms, parasites mature faster, disease spreads more rapidly, pathogens develop immunity to treatments more quickly. Tropics aren't just uncomfortable, they are medically hostile. Right. So now we're moving to this new idea, which is that if you're living in this area, which is like super, super, super hot, then it's actually really difficult for you to live. All right, so here's the world climate zones, and I was talking to somebody. They were trying to like tell me all the like the most productive cultures in the world, and they're like, China is one of the most productive, and then also Turkey, and then like North America, like the whole Canadian population lives in this zone right here. And then see, here's the New Orleans. This is the part Georgia. Like those are the places where they added those air conditioning buildings, and that's they needed those air conditioned buildings before they could really become productive. So you can see that this is the most rich area of the world. Even down here, it's like New Zealand is also doing pretty good. And look, South Africa, the whole concept of BRICS, and then I guess this is trying to tell us that northern India is more productive than southern India. But that's what we're talking about. All right. Now, the thing is with malaria, the reason why it's like such a big problem is because that look, it reproduces at a rate of 90. Means that one mosquito produces 90 mosquitoes. Why is that a problem? Well, if you're living in one of these areas that has malaria, then it's like it's really hard to kill. It's really hard to resolve the issue with malaria. But if you're living in the north, winter is nature's disinfectant. The silent white killer, slayer of insects and parasites, cleanser of pests. A hard frost does more for public health than most medicines. Temperate zones received this gift for free. The tropics never did. Great. And then, I mean, I don't even really want to talk about this too much, but look at this. So, warm African and Asian waters harbor a snail hosting a worm that releases larvae into the water. The larvae enters the humans through the skin. Worms mate inside the veins. Females lay thousands of barbed eggs designed to stay. Victims can't work. They become vulnerable to every other illness. No complete cure exists. So you're like, "Oh, yeah, these guys from Africa, like, man, they don't even work." It's like, okay, so it's really hard for them to work. Why? Because it's so hot. So it's really hard for them to actually work. And then they start working, and what's the next thing that happens is they get sick. When disease controls regions, civilization stalls. Little intertribal trade or communication. Why would you want to communicate with another tribe? Because like you're afraid like we might get sick, like so you have huge problems with these tribes because we don't want to communicate with them. If we They might make us sick and then we'll die. So there's urban expansion becomes impossible. You can't create big cities. Everyone gets sick and will get sick and die. Food must come from outside sources, so we're having a hard time producing food. Cultural and technological development slows. Weren't failing the people weren't failing geography. Geography was defeating them. So, which theory wins? Determinism says geography is destiny. Possibilism says technology can set us free. Reality says technology raises the floor, but geography sets us. The question is whether you can escape geography. Who pays the price for trying? Now, of course, in the book, this is really something like a historical argument because they're saying now with technology, of course, then we're starting to be able to overcome these. All right, so let's jump into the second presentation. Defining a way Defining away the problem will not make it go away. On the one side, modern city gleaming with glass and electricity, civilization winning for now. On the other, vines, tendrils choking an abandoned temple, nature reclaiming in 3 years what it took decades to build. Technology holds geography at bay, but it never defeats it. In the tropics, civilization is not a destination, it is constant, expensive fight. The power has to stay on. Right, so it's gonna continue to show the difference between, like, a temperate zone and a tropical zone. Let's see if we can get to the next slide. Oh, that's the last slide. Oops, that's the end. Okay, let's go to the beginning. All right, so the first thing it's talking about is colonial public health. Who really benefited? French drainage projects in Algeria genuinely saved millions of Algerian lives, eliminating swamps that breed malaria. But the same drainage made the land arable and available for European colonists. The health improvement can be a land grab wearing a doctor's coat. Now, this goes deep, man. So I was thinking about like if you go back to the beginning of the Bible, if we go to Adam and Eve, okay, so what's the devil? Like, what does it mean to be Satan? What does it mean to be the devil? What was the first sin? Like, not the very first, the second sin. So how do we define the devil? And I think that if we look at Cain and Abel, then the major sin is murder and theft. Now, if we look at the Constitution of America, right? They say America is what? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And some people are saying, well, the pursuit of happiness is actually property ownership, right? So the opposite of property ownership is theft. So we got life. What's the opposite of life? Murder. So then the other one is liberty. What is liberty? So when we talk about government, I think the first stop in the government is called the police power. Why? Because that when you have a group, like when you have a family, when you have a group of families, then at some point, if you start to have like assets, when you have property, then eventually somebody's going to want to come and kill you and steal your property. And so self-defense is basically the concept of the police power. You give a portion of your group of people, of your society, the power to enforce some basic laws that to protect the life and property of the people. That's what I think it means by life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so the French, they come into Algeria and they're saying, hey, look, we want to invest in your country. And we've noticed that you're having a problem with your public health. So, there's some issues here because, like, if they're killing the local people and if they're stealing, then it's like, well, you're satanic. I mean, that's the definition. But then on the other hand, what they're doing is they're also providing like some ability for the local people to overcome an issue that they were not able to overcome on their own. And so this idea of colonialism, it's always like a two-edged sword. Like even now that we're looking at this problem with the United States and Iran, it's a two-edged sword. So on the one hand, they're saying, well, like these people, they're killing their own people, they're stealing from their people, they're developing a nuclear weapon, they're this, they're the yeah, whatever. So they have all of these reasons why they need to go to war against. So I mean, it's so confusing about how do we even look at this. But anyways, we don't need to. So the gap is closing, but don't celebrate yet. In 1992, a baby in a low income country could expect 56 years, a baby in a rich country, 77 years, a 37% difference. The gap is shrinking, not because the poor are catching up fast enough, but because the rich are hitting a biological ceiling. You can only live so long. All right. So the idea is that like in rich countries, basically like people are already living to the max, like what is biologically possible, and people in low income countries are starting to catch up. So it means that the conditions in low income countries are improving. The book it kind of talks about this really strange idea. Saving lives is not the same as creating healthy lives. So it says that a tobacco industry researcher once argued that dead smokers don't cost the healthcare system money. I don't really know how to explain this slide. So I mean, it was a point in the book. When you read chapter one, then you can go deeper into this idea. I didn't quite understand what it's trying to talk about. It's talking about the mortality rate. It's also talking about like how healthy is your society. And then it tries to make the point of like, if people are dead, then they're not counted as sick. But I didn't quite understand what that point was about. Who profits from curing the poor? Developing a single drug. Okay, so this is talking about like one of the reasons why some of the poor countries they didn't get like immediate um, solutions to their health problems. So you can see that in 1990, most tropical disease patents lived patients lived in countries with average annual incomes under $400. The government spent less than $4 per person on all healthcare. Right. So this is still talking about why it was really hard for these African countries to develop. One of the reasons is they, first of all, they had all of these different um, pandemics or epidemics. And then also, they didn't have the same access to really great drugs. Even correct medicine can be rejected. So, perfectly sensible public health measures can offend local customs, traditions, and beliefs. Medical tests may be seen as condescending or worse as tools of exploitation. You cannot vaccinate someone who doesn't trust the needle. The same dynamics appear in Western cities. Economic models fail immigrant communities when cultural barriers go unaddressed. Yeah, there's a lot of examples of this. Like, for example, I remember when I was growing up, I heard about Jehovah's Witnesses, and they don't accept blood transfusions. And so, a blood transfusion is something about modern medicine. And then this culture, this religious culture, they don't accept this type of modern medicine, and then people can get sick and even die. And this happens in a lot of cultures where you have like some Western country that comes in and says, hey, we have a solution for you. America with their democracy, hey, we got democracy for you. And the local population is like, I don't think so. An injection is easy, changing behavior is not. So this part of the book, it goes a little bit deeper. It says tropical disease can doesn't just spread through mosquitoes; it spreads through deeply embedded social habits. Vaccines uh, can be delivered in a day. Cultural change takes generation. Geography becomes entrenched not just in the land but in the daily life. So this is that point that I was making at the beginning, where I said, like, even if you're an immigrant population, you move into a new country, your behavior is like you don't see the opportunities. One time I was talking to this lady in Moscow, and like I asked her the question. I said, "Is there a bigger difference between people from different countries or people from different income levels?" And she's like, "Oh, it's definitely income levels." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she said, "You know, when I go, she's like, you know, I'm a CFO for an international organization for an international company. I have enough money that I have a car, I have a house, and then I take my family to the ski slope, and it costs quite a bit of money to take my whole family on vacation to the ski slope. And then when we get there, I meet people from all different countries, and we're all rich. Like, and we can communicate with each other, we can have a good time with each other. We have similar expectations about our vacation. We have similar expectations about our jobs, and like that's and we know how to access this level of society. Poor people in Moscow and poor people in New York and poor people in Shanghai, they have a similar mentality, and it's very different from rich people in those cities. And this is also an aspect about DEI, because sometimes when you come from a situation where you don't have the same access to resources and education, then it becomes different to change your habit, change your mindset, change your life. And that's really something that I've been trying to work on my whole life, is to become educated, try to understand, like, what do I need to understand in order to up my game? How do I get more intelligent? The whole point of this YouTube channel is to up my game so that I can go back to Canada, I can compete at a higher level. The only thing that's holding me back is my education and access to resources. Now, next it talks about rainfall. So tropics don't have gentle rain. London gets 25 millimeters of rain in a month. Nigeria can get 25 millimeters in a single hour. You see? So, you know, it's hard to develop when the rain comes and wipes everything away. How about tropical sun plus iron-rich soil? So the when tropical soil is stripped of its tree cover, the iron and aluminum oxide bake in the sun, and then they're sealed by rain. The result is a hard brick-like crust that water cannot penetrate, the roots cannot break. The land doesn't just stop being fertile, it becomes hostile. When the land dies in 3 years, cities starve. Tropical farms clear land, farm it for 2 or 3 years, then abandon it as nutrients collapse. It's so easy to judge, but like the desert is not waiting. Look at this. So this is I found this one Facebook post where it's trying to say more than 20 African countries have joined together to plant a giant belt of trees to stop spreading of the Sahara Desert. It's called the Great Green Wall. It will stretch from coast to coast. It's crazy. So it's talking about this. The Sahara advances up to 18 feet per hour in some zones, swallowing farmland, villages, futures. The semi-arid zones on the Sahara southern edge face a slow motion catastrophe. Unlike U.S. great droughts, where rain eventually returns, topsoil recovers, tropical desertification is permanent. The land doesn't come back. Great civilizations were not accidents of culture, they were accidents of water. In tropical zones, rainfall is violent and unreliable. Desert rainfall is almost non existent. The only stable foundation of agriculture, therefore, cities, was the river, the Nile, the Tigris, the Indus, the Yellow River. Civilizations followed rivers because everywhere else was a death sentence. In the 1960s, 22 countries in climatically hostile zones received $10 billion in World Bank loans. And then what happened is, boom. In the same decade, cyclones, typhoons, and droughts caused $10 billion in damage. Net progress is zero. The aid wasn't spent on schools, roads, and technology. It was spent on rebuilding what nature destroyed again. You cannot develop a country that is constantly being demolished. The difference in working energy between temperate and tropical zones is not cultural, it's physical. The amazing thing is that Africans have done as well as they have. Geography is actively hostile in human life. So soil that's collapsing after 3 years, disease that reproduces at rates of 90, droughts that don't reverse, disasters that cancel every loan, and yet populations grew, culture survived, civilization persisted. This is not a story of failure, it is a story of extraordinary endurance. All right, so there you go. Defining away the problem will not make it go away. So there you go. That's chapter 1 of this book. And next week, we're going to get another chapter in, I'm not really which book. We're going to have to go back and check it out. But we'll see you next time. It's been Blaine Gates at Space Between Ideas. We'll see you next week. Bye bye.